everyone, this is Doug Kenny again. Here we are on Tales from the Rails with my coach and mentor, actor Andy McPhee. And today we have our first international guest, Cecil Code, who was working for Canadian Pacific years ago. Hey, Cecil, how you doing?
I'm doing great. And yourself?
Doing great.
Yeah, g'day, Cecil. Welcome. You are the first overseas driver that we've had on the program since we started it a few weeks ago. So, I'm not sure we got any awards to give you for that, but welcome.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, no, thanks for accepting.
Yeah.
So, I'll just tell you a little bit about, I'm obviously not in the job now. As I mentioned before, I've been working as an actor for 30 years, but I joined the railways when I was 16, became what we call a trainee engineman, or they used to call them firemen back then, even though you weren't firing on steam. And I spent, it was around about 13 years there, became a driver, did a lot of suburban trains, and then the locomotives behind me, that's where I started at a depot called South Dynon in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. And they were all GMs, S-class. We called them S and B classes, and we had a couple of electric locomotives, big L classes. So that's the locos I started on. There's still probably, that was back in 1970. There's still probably a few of them running around Australia, but they're on the smaller rail systems that haul wheat or something, because they're great locos, but they're out-powered now by the new locomotives. So, Cecil, the first thing I'd like to ask you is, what age did you join the railway?
I actually was 16 years of age. I joined the Ice House Department at Smith Falls for the CPR. And what that does was you check the potato cars that used to come in to make sure that they had heat, or you had to put ice in them in the summertime. You had to fill up the Preco heaters, and it was really it was an interesting job, and I was still going to school. And then from there I learned all the jobs in the yard office, the check-in, the tonnage clerk, the IBM machines, and I kept learning and learning. And then I wanted to go for my B card, and they wouldn't because I knew all the jobs, they wouldn't let me. So I left there and I went out to Revelstoke, BC, and I got my B card out there. And then once all when the winter time came and there was no use for the coal anymore, or coal trains, well, then I got laid off, and then I came back to Smith Falls, got my job back in the yard office, and then the following winter I went out as a yardman in Smith Falls, switching the yards, and but I didn't like it. I don't know why. I was mixed up between the railroad or my apprenticeship for my mechanics license.
Oh, wow.
So I started with taking my apprenticeship for my mechanics license, but every time I had to go, I was supposed to go to school for, they ended up sticking me in the pumping gas and at the till. So I never got there. So I ended up quitting. I went back to CP. They wouldn't hire me because I quit. So I went to Brockville, which is 34 miles from Smith Falls. And I went there and I put in an application. The train master said, okay. He says, I'm going to send you to Toronto. You had to go and do all kinds of aptitude tests and medical. I went with 21 people, and there was one opening in Brockville. So I didn't think I had a chance because a lot of them were engineers' sons, and I didn't have anybody, that I knew. So on the railroad in Brockville. But anyways, I was the only one out of the 21 that passed the eye test.
Mm.
And because they didn't take classes at that time. So then I came back and he says, well, if you don't hear from me, give me a call back in a couple of days. So I didn't hear from him. So I picked up the phone and I could hear somebody dialing at the other end. I said, hello, hello, hello. He says, who's this? I said, Cecil Code. I was trying to call you. So anyway, so it was meant to be, you know, it was meant to be. So I started off on the spare board in Brockville. And then I hired on in April 21st, 1974. And in August or September of 77, I went out to Gimli, Manitoba for the locomotive engineers course. So I spent 2 months out there on the simulators and the rules and regulations and that. So then I came back and I had a year of training with different locomotive engineers. I shouldn't have had a year, but the master mechanic in Ottawa, he was sick. So the master mechanic in Montreal didn't want to qualify me. You wait to the master mechanic in Ottawa to come back to work. So, so anyways, I had a year's training there, and I went from Ottawa to Brent, which is in the tip of Algonquin Park, and it was beautiful going through the bush. Awesome, see all kinds of wild animals and
yeah, right.
And then to Montreal, Quebec.
Wow.
And so yeah, and then they are looking for. I was still, once I got qualified, I went back braking, and they were looking for had a shortage of engineers out of Brockville. So I went to Brockville, then I ran from Brockville to Montreal as a locomotive engineer. And then the shortage ended, and I had to go back to Ottawa because I hired on Brockville, and then we got laid off in Brockville because there wasn't any work breaking. So I went to Ottawa. So, and then I ended up, there was another job. There was a guy junior to me in Brockville. So I did a brakeman's job, and which I got right away. So anyways, I had to work one shift break, and then I was set up as a locomotive engineer.
So when you say brakeman, can you explain to
like a trainman, a brakeman? Yeah, you have your conductor, and then at that time you had two brakemen, one on the head end and one on the tail end. Okay, so if there was any set offs or switching to do, that's what the brakeman would do. Okay?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and and then we had DuPont Canada, and it was a heavy. We spent all day there switching for DuPont, and that's what we did braking. And so
you guys had a lot of like with our enginemen in Australia, like you basically just join loco, you go through the training, the safe working rules, knowledge of the engine, and that's pretty much it. But it sounds like you guys get a lot of skill work in like groundwork, switching, doing different jobs. So you've got a pretty good knowledge of the whole system, really, haven't you?
A lot better than what the older engineers did.